What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Crazy Face Uno podcast, where everyone has a story, everyone's story matters. What's your story? As always, I'm your host, Shane McNeely, and boy, are you in for a treat today. I am excited. It's my honor and privilege to welcome my friend Jonathan Randall Grant. Jonathan,
hello
welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
How's it going, man? We were just talking before we got going, like, this is kind of our first time really kind of, I don't know, getting to know each other in some ways. Like, we've been around the same circles, but it's, I don't know, I just don't remember.
That was like a decade ago.
I know, it's been so long.
And I always get the feeling that, like, it was a very particular time in both of our lives.
Ooh, yeah.
So we're probably completely different people.
100%.
Or, you know, like, we're
100%.
more fully ourselves now than we were then.
I would like to hope so. I'd like to think so. Yeah, no, 100%. Like, yeah. So we first met, I mean, we ran around the same circles as in, like, one of my former podcast guests in the Bethel Boys series, Tyler, your brother. So I feel like that's probably like the time we met at your house, with the Bethel Boys, old Sam and Tony and Calvin and those guys.
And we were both always crashing at their house.
Yeah, always. Yeah, good times. Yeah, and we always, like, I mean, we've been around each other, we've talked to each other, we know each other, but, like, I don't know Jonathan Grant.
Yes.
Dun dun dun. And the plot thickens. No, I wanted to. I kind of. So what I do with most of my guests is I go on Facebook, kind of look through, like, the About You section and kind of write down some things, and I remembered a few different things. You went to Paris with the resident, and what was it called? The resident.
I was the artist in residence at the American Church in Paris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. I want to talk about that for sure. I would call you, like, a creative. You're an artist. You've always been that, like, creative type person, that person that's, like, involved in the art scene. And would you call yourself an artist, or what do you?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I feel like that fits. I just never know, like, do you call people, like, you know what I mean? Like, I asked.
Oh yeah, and some people shy away from that.
Yeah, I know. I had a guy on that, he's written, a book, and he's a writer. He writes every day, and I was like, I would call you a writer, and he was like, yeah, okay. I was like, oh, okay, cool, but
I almost have, like, a different way of describing, I mean, and maybe this is similar for you, but, like, I almost have a different way of describing myself and what I do, depending on who I'm talking to, depending on, like, the context and their
sense.
Connection with the different things that I'm up to. So
yeah, I feel like that makes sense. I mean, I try not to anymore. I guess I'm just kind of like, this is me, like, accept me or don't. But at the same time, like, there's definitely some, you definitely adjust it and alter it a little bit for sure, of, like, who you are, what you're up to, and what you're doing. And yeah, it's true. Yeah, like, Dana and my wife and I went to this thing this last weekend, and, I was like, independent business owner is, like, what I said, because it was like, you needed your occupation. I'm like, well, I don't know. What's my occupation right now? Like, this is what I'm doing full time. It's a business, but it's not, but it is. So I don't know. I just went with that. So you're right. Definitely adjust it. You are, I saw that you are the creative director at Culture Keeper and Anthro Circus. Is that right?
Yeah, which is actually the blog that I started about 12 years ago.
Nice.
That then kind of grew into, I had a team of about 12 people running and editing it. And actually, they're just this fall launching their own publication. So it was Culture Keeper, and now kind of launching them into their own project, Anthro Circus. So, which is really exciting. Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
cool to have been with them. I've kind of gotten busier and busier with other projects. So
Sure.
it's kind of fun to, yeah, I'll still keep that as a backup,
Yeah.
for different projects and stuff. But, yeah, they'll be launching their own thing this fall.
So, do you have much involvement now, or are you just kind of kind of overseeing kind of creative side of things, or get pulled in? What would you call your role now?
It started out as like, I was the one doing everything for it. And then as I added team members, I also kind of got busier with other things, especially once I moved back to the States.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's the past couple of years I haven't been so involved with that, but
Cool.
yeah.
And maybe more recently, or like the top of your list, is you're the communications manager at the Episcopal Charities.
Yes.
And that's
which I just started in August.
Yeah, and it's in Chicago, correct?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And it's really exciting because that's the organization that funds 20 different nonprofits around Chicago. So, and like trains and equips their like teams and boards. So
that's so cool.
Basically, every cool like social justice or grassroots effort that's happening in Chicago is in some way like connected to to us, like what we're doing and what we're kind of gathering the funds and making sure that it gets to the people who are making the change.
Yeah. Wow, that's so cool.
So a lot of cool stories to tell.
Yeah. How did you get plugged in with that?
One of the projects so I've been in Chicago a year and a half, and about almost a year into my time in Chicago, I got connected with a nonprofit here that provides chaplains to the public hospitals.
Okay.
Which, like, some of the hospitals are the hospitals that receive more violent, more like gun wounds than any hospital in the States. Wow. And yet there's no chaplains there. So like this charity provides chaplains to those hospitals. And
cool.
So yeah, I ran social media for them for a year, and then they couldn't keep funding that position, but the organization that funds them said, like, let's see what we can do. So yeah, that's awesome. It's cool to be able to, like, even in a business way, be adjacent to the things I cared about in faith communities and social justice and creative, because I'm producing photo shoots still, and I'm designing, and
you still get to like hit the high points and be like at the top of your creative skills, but still plugged in and involved in like a business way in some ways. That's cool.
Totally. Yeah.
And your background, you went to Asbury College or Asbury University, right? And you studied history?
Yep. History and public relations, and then art history.
Yeah,
I was at UC Berkeley for a while for archaeology.
Nice. That's cool. Is that so? This is maybe the time when I kind of met you. Is like around that time, or a little before, or a little after that, maybe?
A little after that, because I think about the time I met you, I had graduated. I had been in France for my internship. I'd moved to Kentucky to work for a gallery for a little bit.
That's right. I remember.
And
Kentucky.
then was like, I think I need to go back to South Bend, but I don't really know why.
Yeah.
It was actually like one of the lowest points of my life.
We've all been there.
Totally.
Oh man.
And you were a student at Bethel?
Yeah, I went to Bethel.
A junior, maybe?
Probably. So I technically graduated 2010.
Okay.
So yeah, it'd have been like 9 years ago. So it'd have been like junior. Yeah, it'd have been around that time, like 10 years ago, about a decade. Like we were mentioning before. I remember the Kentucky. I remember you going out there. I feel like that was like part of, I don't know, like we just crossed paths like randomly at, and it would have been like senior year of like me being at Bethel, that we'd have really kind of ran into each other, and you would like more so cross paths where you were kind of staying at the house for a bit and, at your parents' house before whatever your next thing was.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then...
Go on.
Oh, yeah, and then maybe after you graduated... Well, because I lived with then two of your roommates, or like Sam and
Matt.
Sam and Matt I lived with.
Yeah.
After that, but then did you move away?
Yeah, I went to so 2010, straight out after college, I went to Haiti for a couple months, and then I went out to Invisible Children, and I stayed out in San Diego at Invisible Children till basically 2013, January
Whoa.
2013. So, and then from there, I moved straight out to Minnesota, where I then lived with Sam and Matt. So, yeah,
Right.
for like 6 months, and then moved into my own little place with some other roommates, and still lived in Minneapolis and St. Paul. Well, it was technically St. Paul, and met my wife there, and she brought us to Florida. So I'm currently living in South Florida, Coconut Creek, Florida.
Yes, awesome.
Yeah, right? Crazy. Never thought I'd be here. Jonathan, man, I'm like searching for, honestly, like if I'm straightforward, like I'm kind of searching for where to begin. Why don't we go like all the way back? And what was childhood like for you? What was like life growing up for you?
Childhood was magical.
Yeah.
And I'm an Enneagram 7, so I'll probably like a lot focus on the positives, but
Cool. Yeah, that's fine. I think
yeah,
I did this test recently. I'm like, it technically the test told me I was a 2. But Janelle, one of my former podcast guests, and you know who Janelle is, she like sent me some stuff, and I'm like, I really resonate with 4. So I need to read the books and stuff and kind of get a little bit better grasp on things. But like 2, I guess, like 2 was like, yeah, that's me. But then 4 was like, nah, that's like, whew. So I don't know exactly what all that means yet, but.
And then look for the connections between 2 and 4, because sometimes there's a connection, another number that connects them, and that's a good indicator of.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta look into that. I've been wanting to do that. It's funny because, you know, I did the podcast with Janelle, and we got off and we've been talking, and she's actually been kind of collaborating, kind of helping out with things around here with Crazy Face Uno, and you know, she was just asking about that, or she mentioned it, and I was like, man, I've been wanting to do this, like take that test for like a year. And so like I got off that podcast with her, and I was like, I just got to do this. Like there's no reason not to do it right now. So I just took the test. And
I'm surprised we didn't make you do it 10 years ago.
I know, right? Maybe I have. Who knows, man? It's hard to tell. No, I've done a lot of those like personality tests, or those like different like tests like those, but I don't feel like I ever did it until like just now. I don't know. I'm excited though, because like there's so many different people that really love it and, you know, connect with it, and I feel like I love like self-discovery and kind of like discovering myself anyway. So like kind of understanding and being like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. And that was one of the reasons that she kind of brought it up, was like me always kind of like wanting to improve myself and always like trying to be the best version of myself as I can be. And so she was like, there's tons of like things that you can use or like utilize through their, you know, through the different things that they like, the numbers and whatnot. So I was like, cool, no reason but the present, let's do it. So yeah,
it's a really good tool.
Yeah. Anyway, your childhood was magical. I love that description. Yeah,
really like close family, really close extended family, lots of creativity, parents who invited us to question everything around us. And even when, I mean, I was a kid who was like making little documentaries to save the woods behind my house, or like protesting them tearing down buildings.
Yeah.
I have an Enneagram 8 wing for my 7-ness.
Nice.
Which
no idea
means
what that
like
means.
I cannot let injustice go.
Okay.
If there is something wrong, I'm like, we're gonna stop that.
Mm.
So
It's a good trait
Yeah,
to
that was
have. Or
pretty strong when I was little.
Yeah. Where do you think that came from? This is a question I love and like I'm really interested in. So many people like there's so many different answers, but that like empathy, I feel like it's like empathy is rich. It's like definitely a piece of that type of mentality. But I don't know, like where do you think that was it innate within you? Was it something you were born with? Was it something you like learned at a young age?
Totally something I was born with because my parents were baffled by it.
Okay.
And it was often frustrating. Like,
Yeah.
I protested Japanese classes because I watched a documentary about how all of these dolphins had been murdered. And instantly I was a dolphin rights advocate, and I wouldn't go to Japanese class, and I wouldn't eat tuna, and I was like protesting everything.
Sure.
And I wouldn't go fishing with everyone and things like that. So yeah, I think they were a little baffled. They were able to like invite me, help me channel that
Yeah.
in other ways, and sometimes they were like, okay, do that, and sometimes they were like, that's inconvenient for us, so let's tone that down.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I was always in spaces in which I had a lot of privilege, so kind of even in my church growing up,
Yeah.
and in my school, like if there was something that I found unjust or wrong, I could talk to my pastor, I could talk to my principal. Even as a 8-year-old, I could be like, I think this is stupid, and here's why. I wrote a book about it for you, and I'd hand it to them.
Wow.
And my grandmother was a pianist. All of my family was musical, so I grew up piano lessons from an early age, constantly singing. I would sit in my tree and sing for hours.
Sure.
I was very imaginative, and I had parents that very much encouraged reading and music and imagination in ways that was really powerful. So
cool.
Yeah, that's what I think of when I think of my childhood.
That's awesome. At what point in time was school? Did you go through school? Was that an environment that was welcoming to the arts and to your style?
Yeah, and I feel very much.
Did you go to public school?
Yes. Yeah. The public school that my grandmother and grandfather had also gone to.
That's a fun fact.
Yeah, just a few blocks away. So we've been in the same little enclave for since the 20s. Mm-hmm. So it was cool. Yeah, it was cool to have that connection. And even when I go back to that neighborhood, at the grocery store, I'll run into someone who, my great grandfather was the first person to cut their hair.
Yeah.
Or, it's nice to still have that connection to a place and be known. And
yeah. I
loved elementary school.
When did you know you wanted to go to Asbury, or you went to where was it? Where was the first school you went to?
Oh, to Asbury, yeah.
But you went to, and then you studied history there, but you studied archaeology first, correct?
Oh, no, second.
Yeah. Okay.
At UC Berkeley.
Okay, UC Berkeley.
Well, my parents kind of shot down all my first choices.
Okay. What were your first choices?
Well,
do you remember?
First, I wanted to go study in France, and they kind of shut that down.
Yeah.
Because they kind of knew I would never come back.
Yeah.
And then also there was a program, there were a few other programs, and I don't know, I'm more collaborative than my brother, for instance. So with my parents, when they were like, we're going to take you to schools, what schools? And I would list them, and they'd be like, well, okay, not those, but how about these? And I'd be like, okay. And kind of go with it. Whereas he's just going to say, I got into a school, this is where I'm going.
Yeah.
So yeah, they wanted me to go to a Christian school, and that's what they had done. So that's kind of what I assumed I would do. And my cousins and aunt and uncle had all gone to Asbury. And at the time I was really interested in the classics and Latin. And I was doing a lot of Latin in choral music, and was very intrigued in eventually teaching Latin and the classics. So I Asbury had a great program for that. So that's kind of what drew me there. And it wasn't, I mean, within my first year, I kind of realized like I'm actually shit at languages. And
Likewise.
I grew up in a family that like discussed history like it was like it was happening currently, or like people
Yeah.
who were dead 1,000 years were like our friends and lived down the street. So studying history just kind of made sense for me. And also anthropology, which is why the archaeological part and the art history part
Yeah.
and the study of cultures and people, it was kind of all woven together for me. So it still informs a lot of the work I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, history and art, they really go hand in hand. When you go into whether it's whatever, like city, Paris, it's like some of the most beautiful buildings and whatever. There's still like just such beautiful pieces of art that are iconic within the cities. So they definitely go hand in hand, and in art history,
Totally.
being a part of that. How do you feel like your college years kind of shaped who you are today? I feel like that was such a big part of my life. College, and I went to Bethel, as your brother did, and Bethel now University, Bethel College now University, and it's one of the. I just took a survey from Bethel recently. They sent me this like email. It was like, what do you think is the most like thing you took like as an alumni? Like, what do you think the most like what was the biggest thing that you took from your experience? And it was like your academics, your education, your religion and spirituality, or whatever it was. And then it was like friendships and your relationships, or I don't know, whatever, mentoring and relationships, or however they worded it. But I was like, relationships for sure. Like that was the people that I met and the relationships I built there have 100% shaped a big chunk of who I am today. And from this keeps coming up, but like Derek Griffey was one of the ones that made me ask the question of why I believe the things I believe, and to the books I read, to the things I studied. I was a youth ministry major at Bethel, so, and I got to my junior year and I was like, well, shit, like, now what do I do? Because that's not what I want to do, like, I don't want to be a youth ministry major, but here we are. So, to now, and some of those relationships and those friendships, though I'm not as close with everyone that I met there, they shaped so much and allowed me to have the conversations I feel like that I needed to have at that time to be the man and be the person that I am today. Hindsight's always 20/20. If I could go back, would I go to Bethel? Maybe not. But but at the same time, like if it allowed me to learn the lessons that I've learned, I don't know, like I wouldn't want to miss out on those friendships and those relationships that I built there.
Totally. Yeah, and I feel similarly, especially about Asbury, that it's not like anything happened there that hadn't already been going on in my life before. But the way in which it escalated those things, for instance, like I've always grown up in circles where people were discussing history and culture and theology and the arts and analyzing things in deep and meaningful ways.
Sure.
But like putting that basically on steroids for 4 years made it into a piece of who I was officially.
Sure.
And also like even as a kid in some ways, and then in high school I started to be on a lot of committees and panels and student council and stuff like that. And in college at Asbury, we had so many opportunities to do that in a way that was very professional.
Okay.
To be on committees with the president of the school and to learn how board meetings work and how fundraising's done and how galas happen and how I also worked in the PR office. So like, how does public relations work, and how does what are best practices in business and in culture and in church and nonprofit spaces. And so I think in many ways, like, I was kind of groomed into being a professional, and I think that's often a piece that is missing in the educational sphere.
I would agree.
I mean, other than mentorship, is like, we finish college and some of us feel like, oh, I have a degree, but I don't feel qualified, you know. So to be able to walk out of college and then, like you said, like all of the relationships. So those are still some of my closest friends, and still a lot of my career and success in life is based on the connections I made in college, which is maybe the whitest thing I can think of.
I mean, I can't say that I'm far behind that comment, and I'm also agree with you that it's probably one of the whitest things I could say. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think that there's like a missing piece for sure in the like education world of just kind of that real world experience, which it sounds like you got more of than maybe most in some ways, because you know, when I went to Invisible Children, I feel like Invisible Children was like trial by fire. You like got thrown in if you were competent and if you took initiative and you took the leadership, like took the lead on something, they were like, all right, go for it, you know, which is awesome, which is not something you find in a lot of work environments where it's like you kind of need to have the experience, the background before they like cut you loose. But Invisible Children, they really like recognized strengths and allowed you to go, man, that's something you seem to be pretty good at. Like, go for it. Let's see what you can do.
Oh,
you know?
Awesome.
And which is awesome. You know, it's allowed you to see, you know, meetings behind closed doors, you know, like that you wouldn't, a transparency within the staff that was, you know, really valuable. And like, I would love to understand the workings of a board meeting, you know, although I would say that I'm pretty business savvy and I understand things a lot, I would still say like, man, an example or being able to have that experience in like a PR, especially nowadays with the way technology is and everybody is your own brand in some ways. You know, we kind of mentioned that before, you know, we got going, but it was just like your own brand is your own thing nowadays, and knowing how to conduct yourself in some ways or what the standard is. And you don't have to stick to those plans. You don't have to stay with the status quo necessarily, but to understand how that's perceived in a business sense, in a business world. And it's a whole
and Tyler and I talk about frequently that like even the group of friends that I had at Asbury, I mean, in contrast with like how much, I mean, we still were mischievous like you guys, but like, I mean, even when we came in, like some of them already had thriving online retail businesses or design practices. Like as freshmen in college, we're already earning considerable incomes, and we're the kind of, like my friends were the group of people who wore blazers and heels and dresses and suits and for fun.
Yeah.
And so there was a little more of that mood at Asbury, and also in my friend group was very like, we're going to conquer the world, like look out.
Yeah, which is cool. Do you feel like, I mean, I feel super naive about my like college years, even sometimes with what I'm doing now. I'm like, man, today was actually a little rough for me, to be completely honest. If I'm being vulnerable, like my wife came home and she's like, how was your day? And I'm like, honestly, like I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Like I have a lot of dreams. I have a lot of big goals and like ambitions, and I have no idea what I'm doing in so many ways, you know, like I don't I know that I have to take one step in front of the other, but sometimes I get a little more paralyzed with like, all right, what is the next step? You know, like what makes the most sense? And, that it's some, what is the word? Naivety, you know, some of that comes out for sure. I'm confident. I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to give up. I want to pursue this. This is something that I'm very like passionate about, you know, this project and, Crazy Face Uno. And I really truly believe that, you know, this is something worth pursuing. But it's a lot sometimes, and it's scary, and I can get caught up in that. And I look back into college days, and man, I had no idea. It's interesting as I've done this podcast, you know, and I've had a lot of friends from college days. I've had friends from my Invisible Children days, and a lot of the college days, you know, type friends, they're all like, yeah, you guys were always like pushing the boundaries, and you guys were always like, you know, like I really looked up to you guys or whatever. And it's like, man, I didn't see that when I was in it, you know, like I had no idea. Like I have no idea. Perspective for me is like a word that just keeps like ringing in my head. Perspective. From my own perspective of what I am now, to what I'm doing now, to who I am now, to what people think of me, who I am. You know, a lot of my insecurities come out through that. And it's something that I've like challenged myself with for sure. But even like, I had no idea what people's perspective of what we were doing then was, or even is now in some ways, you know? And it's, you know, you use the words like, we weren't as mischievous as you guys. And it's like, it's funny. 'Cause like, yeah, we were mischievous. Like that was totally like, we pushed the boundaries at every like corner, you know, if you were, I don't know, we didn't settle for the status quo, and we didn't settle for anything. We were like, nah, we were together in it, you know? And we were a team. We were a cohesive group in some ways. And yeah, we all had our different views and different perspectives. And that's the beauty of things now when I look back. And as we were able to get together for the first time in almost a decade, you know, this last summer, and seeing it where everybody's at now. And man, for the most part, everybody's hearts are right there, but we're just such different people today too. And I love that we're able to look at that and go, you're such a different person, and I still love you. And still pick up right where we left off, still care about the other person. It was almost as in the sense that like that time apart was necessary for us to find ourselves and to figure out, because we almost like leaned on each other too much, you know? But I don't know. I'm all over the place here with this little rant that I'm on, but yeah, perspective and being naive and like ambitions. I don't know.
And the crazy thing about that is that like about being driven towards something and wanting something, and is, you know, like if literature has taught us anything, it's that it's very feasible to get there and realize that wasn't what we want. Or that we had what we want.
It's not where I saw this go, that along. Conversation or that like part going, and you're so right. Yeah, no, you're right.
I mean, because I'm also like very driven. Like I wake up in the morning and the first thing I'm like, I have so much to accomplish in my life, and I just can't turn that off. And yet, like every day I have to just calm the fuck down.
Yeah,
and
right.
Be like, I have everything I want. I have everything I need. I like just need to be present and look around me and you know, see what's around me. Because otherwise, I'll waste my life wanting to accomplish something specific. Or I mean,
almost and for me, it's like it's a fear of not accomplishing what I want to.
100%.
You know, versus like the positive side of things, where it's like pursuing something, it's like the fear of like, it's like my own ego, like legitimately, like it's my own
but
ego.
also partnered with the kind of theology we grew up with, because we grew up with a theology of like, if you do slightly the wrong thing, you will miss out on that huge thing that God wanted you to do.
Yeah.
And the difference between accomplishing that thing and not is minute.
Yeah.
And
The thin and narrow.
yeah. And I think a lot of us who struggle with, I mean, it's almost sometimes a debilitating fear of like doing the exact right thing, because we really
yeah, 100%.
we really want to make the most out of our life, and we really want to do the very best thing,
and you forget to live in the moment.
100%. Yeah.
And that's where I feel like I'm at in some ways. Like, I'm so afraid of, like, instead of just embracing, like, and enjoying this, like, it's a journey, you know? And I have the support from my family. I mean, not just my wife, but, like, my mom, my dad, and, you know, I have a close family as well, like you do. And, you know, like, my family supports me 100%. My wife supports me 100%. Like, she's financially backing our life right now, you know? And, and honestly, like, the money that goes out into Crazy Face Uno right now, she's financially backing because she's financially backing me, you know? So, like, she's the one that comforts me and was like, we got this. Like, it's okay. Like, you've got this. Like, keep going, you know? Like, I believe in you. Like, this is worthy. Like, this is worth pursuing. And even with that support, like, why is there so much questioning, you know? And I do question. I really do look at my faith background, my religious background, and go, man, you really fucked me up, you know? And like, so many ways.
For as many tools as it gave us, it also gave us, you know, some baggage.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, like, I don't know where you're at with that, but, like, man, yeah, like, I don't know. Yeah, like, for sure, there's, like, been so many tools and there's so many things I'm grateful for, and the mind that I've been able to have, and, like, the upbringing and the values and the character as to who I am, you know, like, it's so much rooted in, you know, that time of my life, for sure. But there's so many insecurities, I feel like, that come, like we were talking about, you know, like, that kind of come out in a lot of ways because of that, like, pursuit of being good, and versus, like, just living. You know?
Yeah. I constantly go back to Mary Oliver. I don't know if you're familiar. The poet Mary Oliver.
Yeah, I'm familiar with her.
And the line that she has in Wild Geese, where she says, like, you do not have to be good. You do not have to crawl on your knees repenting. Like, that idea of that, yeah, you just get to be. And it's actually, being in French culture has been therapeutic in that way too, because they even the language has the phrase être, like, to be. And there is more. I found, like, being in that culture helped me start the process of freeing from, like, my value is in what I do and accomplish and each day, to I am, like, I just get to be, and that's enough. And even dismantling a lot of the really negative monetary language around value. And
and I've came face to face with that through this, you know, and whatnot, for sure. Just I mean, I don't know, like, there's something deeply rooted within me that wants to provide, you know, and be that provider. And you know, it's been something that I've had to, like, relinquish, and I have to lay that at my feet, you know, to use a more, like, Christianese kind of phrase, but, like, I have to lay that down, like, daily sometimes, you know, where I'm like, all right, you know, like, my wife supports, she's on board, you know, we're a team. She has no problem voicing when she disagrees. So, like, we've had this conversation. she's told me she would tell me if she had a problem with it, and she doesn't, and she's willing and able and wants to, and I have to just accept that and go, all right, this is where we're at. Now I have to make the most of, my time and I put that undue stress on myself sometimes to be like, man, like I gotta like, still, that's where I like transfer that feeling though, is to like, I have to be the best steward of my time and my energy and what I'm doing throughout the day. And there is an element of that, right? Like for sure, 100%. But I think that I have to be careful and be gracious with myself as well.
Yeah. That's a balance.
Mm-hmm. So let's get off of me, because I feel like this has gone into like therapy for Shane here. But you've touched on France and Paris and kind of your experience there. What were some of your big takeaways? Like what were some of the things you were like really proud of doing there, and what are some of the things you learned? Like what was your experience at the Artist in Residence and the American Church in Paris?
Oh yeah. So my time in Paris, yeah, I mean off and on for 12 years. I was
I didn't
directing
realize
shoots.
It was that long. 12 years.
Yeah. Part of the time with that gallery, part of the time as artist in residence at the American Church, directing shoots for fashion magazines and brands.
Yeah.
Working with different bloggers and creatives.
Yeah.
And so a kind of balance between like work in churches and work in the fashion world, which I early on I tried to find ways to like merge those two, and it proved that those are just separate things.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
so
sure.
My work with churches has looked a lot like just painting commissions for them, so altarpieces or murals or stations, and then a lot of consulting around LGBTQ inclusion or creativity, hosting retreats and workshops for artists.
Yeah.
Some of the same things I was doing actually when I knew you.
Yeah.
Back in the day. And that just kind of happened organically because that's not my training.
Yeah.
And then working in fashion, like I would produce shoots. So working with a magazine, make a mood board, pull together a team of photographers, models, pull from different designers. So it'd kind of followed a rhythm off and on of I'd go to Istanbul for a month, I search for locations, wow. I meet with different designers, and some of them will, I pull from their collections or they make a specific piece for the shoot. So I followed that kind of pattern and then come back to the States for the summer and do like workshops and work with churches here. And it was always kind of a touch and go, like, will I have enough money? Will this work? Like,
yeah,
often people supporting my work, who wanted to see the work with churches move forward and who wanted to see churches make some movements as far as being spaces of creativity or inclusion. So a lot of that. And then kind of simultaneously as I was doing those things, I started to have more conversations with my friends who were theologians and priests and clergy, and started to kind of realize that the space that I was holding in the fashion community was that of a chaplain. Like, run into people at Fashion Week and they spend 3 hours talking to me about their spiritual journey and kind of processing that with me. And then I run into them a year later and we catch up about those things. So it became clear that that's kind of the space that I was holding, and I really wanted to do that faithfully and well, which started a process of discerning vocation in the Episcopal Church to become a priest.
Okay.
Which is currently like not something that I'm still exploring, but I'm still left with the like, okay, these are my people, artists, creatives, fashion community, LGBTQ community, like how do I care for them and how do I do that well? And it's, it's one of the great ironies of the church in America right now that there are more queer people going through seminary and being trained in these ways than there are churches. And so,
that's cool.
Or, or even formal faith communities. So it's kind of like, here are all these like people, like what's about to happen in the world. Because, here we are.
Yeah.
So, so I'm kind of in a space of like figuring out what it looks like to like live into that part of my vocation,
sure,
without the permission of a formal institution, and without kind of the formal training that that if I were straight, for instance, or less creative,
sure,
if I'm honest, I would have access to. So yeah, currently exploring those things and caring for the people around me.
That's awesome. What is so you've mentioned the Episcopal Church several times, and that's obviously where you kind of work is through the Episcopal Charities now. What's some of their, like, you and I grew up in this like Protestant Christian church. How does that relate? What is the Episcopal side of things? What does that mean? That's my ignorance in a lot of ways. Like, I don't know exactly what the Episcopal to, like, the missionary church of Bethel College, or, the whatever, the Protestant Christian church that I grew up in, or, whatever that is.
So, yeah, one of the things that growing up in a fundamentalist evangelical Christian setting that never made sense to me, and if I'm honest, to my family, like my dad was always struggling with this too, was that the evangelical fundamentalist sect as a whole is not one that encourages you to show up with your intellect and to like do deep intellect and thorough intellectual labor. And routinely, I watched my grandparents and then parents feel frustrated and thwarted that those kinds of aspects of critical thinking were shut down. And
in the sense of, if you don't mind me interjecting, is this in like the sense of like challenging or questioning or just asking questions even within like the doctrine of
that, but also the doctrine of those of that sect, and you may have a different opinion on this, is one that only functions in a circular way. So like, we believe this because this, and it's kind of like
100%.
Point A proves point B, and we know that because point B proves point A, and there's like no other, it like proves itself, and so there's no other accountability, intellectual accountability.
It's like I had a conversation earlier today. This is my second podcast, as I mentioned to you, but one of the conversations I had with this gentleman, so when this podcast drops, it'll be from last week's podcast with David Hayward, and we just talked about, like, it's the classic answer is like, the answer is always like, because the Bible said so. It's that circular question, and it's like, it's annoying. It's not like actually asking or answering questions. It's like, well, that's just because, it's that's the rhetoric in some ways of like, well, I don't know, but that's because this is what it says. So like, don't ask any more questions, or, whatever it is.
And that was something that honestly frustrated my father more than it frustrated me. The piece that one of the pieces that drew me to the Episcopal Church, besides that piece, that it was a place of like, one, you're expected to, when you come to a text, or when you come to an idea, or when you're expected to consider, to use your brain. God gave you that. And don't leave it at home. Along with tradition. And that was a piece that resonated with me strongly. As a kid, it never made sense to not give the past a vote, and to not and the fact that we were worshiping like the past didn't happen. And it wasn't that we grew up in traditions that weren't traditional, but they almost selected some traditions over others and did not but didn't admit that they were doing this.
Yeah.
So there was a dishonesty. I mean, I feel now looking back, I wasn't actively like, this is intellectually dishonest that we, don't tell people why we prioritize some traditions over others, or, there was like, general mumbling about the Pope, but nothing.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying.
The Episcopal Church is a little more, is some variations of it are liturgical, and some are very, probably more familiar with what you and I grew up with. But
yeah,
as a whole, it is more ecumenical, more open to people of other traditions and faiths, and yeah, I grew up in a tradition that, in a Bible church where I was kind of grew up believing like, well, maybe Methodists aren't even Christians.
It's true, yeah. Like, you question even the different like denominations within your own like quote sect, like you had mentioned. But yeah,
right.
Even like
let alone Catholics.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like, Catholics were like the evil stepchild of the like Christian religion, in so many ways. And yeah, it's interesting. So like, because we haven't communicated, I've said this so many times on the podcast, it's like everybody's like, we get it, but like, I don't call myself a Christian anymore. So yeah. So like this conversation, like I fully understand. I this was maybe even this conversation this morning that I had with David was really interesting because, just he talked about how like it's so intertwined within who we are, like my faith and Christianity and what I grew up believing and knowing is just so like, it's this braided big knot in some ways. It's just this like piece it's very much a part of who I am as an individual, like you can't run away from it. It's just who I am. And I hold on to so many of those different things and pieces, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. We kind of touched on that a little bit earlier as well, but it's just interesting when you look back and when you look at things differently, and you look at things from an outside perspective. I finally came back around where, there was a long time, you go through these different like phases of like, man, I was pissed and I was upset and I was angry and I was sad and, whatever. And now I'm to the point where I'm like, man, it's not worth my time. Like I'm just going to live my life, and I'm going to be, I just think that like David talked about this, David Hayward on the podcast from last week. If you're listening now, he talked about being deeply united as one, and like with humanity, with people, with the world. And like, that's like, love really is the answer. And he's like, I know it's so cliche and whatever, but I really agree with that, and like, it's just, we're so deeply united as one. And you and I, there's so many more similarities than there are differences between you and I and humanity and people in general. And to fixate on some of these like small things, I just don't think it's necessary. And I know that that's it's small, but it's big as well, and
yeah.
But I just think that focusing on how I can contribute to the world in a positive way is more important than fixating on, whether I'm saying the right thing and Sunday mornings or whatever that is, and just loving people, empowering people, loving people, celebrating people. And that's really, a fundamental part of what Crazy Face Uno is striving to be, as well as empowering, loving, and celebrating people. And, everybody has a story and everybody's story matters. I just believe that. I think that this is, I don't know. I think it's important. I don't know. Kind of
random. Sounds like a very strong theology.
I think so. It's we're rooted together, and we're better together than we are apart. And I think that I love debating. I love talking. I love digging into like what people think, and I'll play devil's advocate all day long. Just to kind of play both sides. Sometimes I see both sides, so we like to paint the picture of the world and of different sides and of different things as such like a black and white and a right and wrong, or yes and no, or whatever that is, but it's so complex. Our life and our world is so complex, and it's not that simple. And I think
I'm just now starting to appreciate how many times I argued with people passionately on subjects on which I am not an expert.
Exactly. Yeah.
How much time have we all wasted having opinions rather than being curious?
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's such a waste of energy, and curiosity is has become my new mantra, that someone tells me their opinion and I'm like, tell me more about that. Why do you feel that way? What makes you think that?
Yeah.
I love that even like this podcast is, you're opening up to people's stories. So you're in essence saying like, tell me more. Why? I'm curious.
Yeah.
And that posture in the world, like that, to me, that's the new healing posture.
I agree. I hope that's true. I agree with you. I agree with you. I just hope that it is true, like that questioning and like that curiosity. Like it, I hope that that's real, because I think it is important. And there's so many different viewpoints in this world and in this life. And, when we can find our commonalities and find the things that we agree with and just love each other anyway, you don't have to agree with it. But you can respect the person. You can give them dignity. You can love them. You can. Everybody deserves to be worthy of life and respect and love and.
Yeah. And I found it to be, honestly, too, the only way to engage people who believe very terrible things. That, like, I think we're all in everyone feels the polarization that's happening now.
Yes.
I think it's a misnomer maybe to say it's an increasing amount of polarization, but we're certainly aware of it.
Yeah.
And therefore, in conversation with varied people who are dear to us, or were dear to us, or we wish were dear to us, like, we're all, entering these conversations and kind of, like you said, like, to get to the bottom of the human element of it, we kind of have to engage from a point, a posture of curiosity.
Yeah.
And that kind of de-escalates people. People just want to be heard.
Yeah.
Known and seen, and yeah.
And the human element, and this is where, sorry, bringing things back to like Crazy Face Uno, but like that's where this is kind of the direction I want to take this is, it's story. There's this human connection, technology is here. We're all, the age-old criticism of like, man, everybody's like in their phones, everybody's texting, everybody's looking at their phone and blah, 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 blah. Cool. Well, it's not going anywhere, So, like you can't really change the other person. This is two separate thoughts here. One, you have to be in control of who you are, right? If you can try to convince somebody else, but like that's that's not something you're in control of. You're not in control of someone else's opinion, someone else's thoughts, someone else's, whether they're ignorant, whether they're brilliant, whether they're, just whatever they are, like you can't control those. You can only control how you interact and how you control and how you behave as an individual. And so I think that if we start taking a little bit more responsibility for our own selves and stop pointing the finger and start looking at all these other like escape routes for whatever it is that's wrong in the world and what other these opinions that you disagree with, and take responsibility for your own actions, that I think that we'll be in a lot better place, But people are almost afraid to like deal with their own shit sometimes. And so that's one thought. And then the other is like, yes, technology, there's all these things, there's all these like, it's not going anywhere. It's here. And why not engage? Why not, try to find a way to have this human element, to hear other people's stories? If we're not sitting down across from each other and like actually engaging in conversation and understanding, when was the last, you could be the like outlier, right? There's some of my friends and some of the people that we know that are special people and that actually take time out and to learn other people's stories. But I feel like this podcast has opened my eyes to the fact that like I don't sit down with my friends for an hour and a half and dig deep into their life and go, tell me your story. What's going on in your life? And a lot of people that I talk with are like, yeah, I don't have this conversation with people. I wish I would do this more, But this podcast is an environment. It's this place that allows these questions, allows these conversations. It's like, it's okay. You let down your guard. You have this like vulnerable, this authentic conversation. Versus like if you're just going through life, you go watch, for me, it's like I go watch a football game, or I go and, do whatever and go to the bar and have a drink with somebody. But are you really asking them questions? It's just this like banter back and forth. Are you getting to know them? Are you really getting to know them? Sometimes, right? And I know that, again, we run around with some different people that we really do kind of engage. And, I could sit down with Tony and we could dig deep into his life and my life for hours upon times, but creating this environment where like, hey, let's interact with people. Let's learn about other people. Let's learn our similarities. When you start telling your stories, there's a lot of things that you find and you're like, man, I really resonate with that. I never knew I resonated with Jonathan, the way that I did. We got a lot of similarities. Or whatever it is, it's like, oh, I really appreciated him saying that one little thing, and you can take that into your life and use that for good. And I don't know, I think that there's just so much value in owning our own lives and like just finding those things that we have in common and using modern day technology and resources to engage with people and to, dive deeper.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find yourself in those conversations? I know you've got, through your website, I definitely checked out some of your, like art and faith, your little short videos that you have. Those are really cool, by the way. Those are really awesome, of like how, those conversations are like one of those like genuine conversations and authentic conversations that I think that are important to have, and, very similar to some of the things that we're striving to do here. But do you find yourself in those conversations a lot of like digging into, people's life and learning about them?
Oh, I mean, that's primarily what I do. I mean, I find most of my work, whether as like a chaplain to the creative community or other, is like one-on-one coffees with people.
Yeah,
and
I figured
I used to really like group gatherings, and now, I mean, like, I don't know. I'm less and less capable of having like casual conversations.
Yeah.
If I am out dancing with friends, like I'll be randomly asking people about like their grandparents or their like their faith tradition, or
Yeah.
the geography of their life, and
Yeah.
I want to know deep and real things, and
I'm with you. I have too many
I'd rather
questions.
talk to people one-on-one and get to the bottom of what they're experiencing.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's important. I think it's important to know each other and to understand each other more. So, we've touched on a few different things: Episcopal Church, kind of your role within that, your role in your, having your role with the LGBTQ plus community. How do you find yourself, living in that community and fostering this environment that you've kind of talked about? What does that look like for you?
As someone who received a lot of permission,
Yeah.
always growing up to like question things and always permission to show up as myself. Like,
Yeah.
I was rarely censored, in meaning my parents let me wear really weird things and they let me be weird and myself. And
Sure.
I think part of liberating others is just passing on that permission in some ways. Not that anyone needs my permission, but living freely as ourselves is the permission, so I think a lot of my work is that, like, is in modeling that, is in encountering barriers and obstacles within churches, for instance.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of churches are like, will bring me in because they're like, oh, we want to become inclusive of the queer community.
Yeah.
But then, after digging a little bit, we hit a wall, and there are other issues. And in something that probably does not surprise you at all, like, when churches bring me in to like create even a piece of art, digging a little deeper is like, there are issues with, in the creative process with a faith community, there are issues connected to, that need addressing with acts of anti-racism and exploration of queerness and misogyny. And these things are all connected in some way.
Yeah.
They all lurk within our hearts and therefore within our organizations.
Yeah.
And, so
how do you confront that? How do you deal with that?
Oh, I ask a lot of questions. A church that I've worked with for years, I finally was meeting with the board a few weeks ago, and just like casually afterwards in conversation was able to be like, hey, like, now I notice that on your board, like, it's really cool that your church board has women. Like, that's very cool. But also, they're like, no young people, which is weird since you want more young people. And there are no queer people, which is weird because you want queer people. And there are also, like, everybody's white. So what's that about?
It's like the practice what you preach kind of thing. Like, you can say you want this, but do you really? Because you haven't made any changes to make that like a thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, we just got to keep asking the questions, and I find that for as much as my work is about making things, it's also just stirring up trouble.
Asking those questions. But that's important. It's really I like how you put that, because when you look at those things where it's easy to say the right thing, and it's another thing to actually take action on the things you say. Totally.
Yeah, and very few, every church wants artists, and every church wants to be perceived as cool, and very few faith communities have the actual willingness to do the work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been, and again, like, this is something that won't surprise you at all, especially considering your work and journey, but like,
Yeah.
the longer I work in churches, the more convinced I am becoming that the future of the church is not in church. Like,
yeah.
I go to churches that are like, you know, barely struggling to do the bare minimum around of justice. And then, you know, walk across the street and I'm in these like radically queer spaces that are radically hospitable and constantly pivot to center the most marginalized person there.
Yeah.
And, you know, very much reflect caring for each other and making sure that everyone has their needs met. And come to find out, only one of those places looks like what Jesus had remotely in mind.
Yeah.
So, as the church, there's churches are starting to feel the squeeze, and even in my denomination, that it has been so expansive, and as churches that we grew up in would consider it kind of wishy-washy.
Sure.
But even it's starting to like buckle down a little bit and feel like the end is near, and for it's it as a thing, and I don't know, like they're getting afraid. Churches are getting afraid and more miserly with their love and resources when there's all this expansive abundance like just beyond their doors. Which
it's
is
like going back to what you know when you're like threatened.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
retreating.
It's retreating to like the core of who you are. It's like, I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think of it in the like Annalise Riga.
Yeah.
Who you remember?
Yeah.
She and I were huge fans of the film Mame. I don't know if you've seen it, but Annalise would always quote when you guys were at Bethel, "Life is a banquet, and most poor sons of bitches are starving to death."
Yeah.
And I think it's true of like there, like the world is abundant, and most people in the pews are like dying. Like they just I don't know. Yeah.
We just don't interact that way anymore. And it's like the old concept, like adapt or die, And like if you're not willing to, and it's not that that's the thing. It's like, again, it kind of goes back to like, well, you say you're willing to, but are you willing to? Like,
totally.
Like, are you willing to take that action? Because you're not. So like, talk's cheap. What's next? Like,
yeah. And I mean, I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing if I didn't see, the possibilities there. Like,
of course,
I do have, and probably with you, and I know with Tyler, like, I see churches as this like communal expression of imagination, and a huge capacity for creativity and justice to come out of that. But obviously, like we've just, like you've just said, like it's failed to live into that in any kind of, or it's ceased to be that, or
the community piece is like the number one component of religion in church, in my opinion. Like there's nothing, my experience, that's the one thing in my life that I miss out of the church, is that community, this like camaraderie, this, but I'm not interested in going and talking in a small group about the Bible,
Yes.
Like I want to talk about other things. I want to talk about real life things. Like I want to talk about life, and I want that, but that's the one thing that I feel like I miss the most, is that feeling of like, even, I don't know, that there's like a connection. There's this like community, there's some camaraderie that you get in some ways. It's that tribal like idea, tribal thought, or, you know, whatever that is. And I don't know, that's the one thing that I miss in so many ways.
Yeah.
But I don't know how.
And it deepens. It almost reinforces the traumas that we've experienced within church circles.
Yeah.
When we have to relinquish the things within those spaces that gave us life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. That's the one thing that like I've thought about, like when I decided not to go back to church, or not to go to church. Like that was a big step for me. You know, my dad was a pastor. I grew up in the church, like all this. But when I finally was like, you know what, Shane, it's okay that you don't go to church and you don't have to. And I gave myself permission, you know, and you mentioned that of like giving, you know, kind of giving people permission to be themselves. And it's huge. And again, nobody needs Jonathan Randall Grant's, you know, permission. But if you're the only person to ever give it to them to be themselves, like it's big, it's important, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, for me, that was my first thing. It was like, that was my you know what, it's okay. And that was a big weight off my shoulders. And the thing that keeps me, not keeps me, cause I'm pretty okay with who I am and where I'm at these days, you know? But the one thing that I miss, the one thing that it would be like, man, I just moved to a new state, a new city, a new town, a new place. I'm like, how do you meet people? You know, I'm 31 years old. How do I meet people? Where do you go? What do you do? You know, you get involved in your clubs and your groups and your things that you're interested in, but that's easier said than done. It's still hard, you know? You can't just go up to somebody, you know, in college, you've got these like built-in network, this built-in group, this built-in tribe that you're already like
totally
surrounded yourself with, you know, and I work from home. So I don't have this like job community that I'm like connected with. So how do I meet people? What do I do? You know, it's hard. It's really hard. It's lonely sometimes. Like I get very lonely. Like I'm by myself. Who do I have to go after that? Like until my wife comes home, sometimes I'm like, okay, you know, I've got great friends. I could text them, but they have lives too, you know, like they just can't drop everything at the whimsical like needs of Shane McNeely, you know? And not that the church could either, but like when you have this thing to fall back on, this like, that sounds weird too, but like this, you know, this community that you can like, well, at least I can go and talk about it at my small group on Wednesday, or, you know, whatever it is. And it's like,
yeah. And
even
it
if
filled
you
that
don't
space for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if you don't love it, and even if it doesn't feel the most welcoming, or there's still something about it that's like necessary. And it's that need to share life with people. And I get that through this podcast, to be completely honest. Like being able to like have this conversation with you and to have these conversations I get to have with people it's awesome. You know, it's beautiful. Yeah. And I get to share life with people, and I get to build this network and this community of people through the podcast. And, you know, that's like my own, like that's the part that's self-serving for myself with this, but it's beautiful. And that's what I want to share with people. I think that people can take this conversation. I think people can take these conversations, and even if it's just literally what we're talking about of like, man, just ask somebody, dig a little deeper into their life. You know, maybe you and I are the anomalies, the, you know, the outliers in some ways of like, man, I'm the same way. Like I sit down and get talking with somebody, and my wife always talks about like, man, you could talk to a wall. I'm like, yeah, I could, but like, I want to know more. And sometimes like I have to like hold myself back, because I'm like, man, I want to know. You just said you're divorced, but you've been, you know, whatever it is. And like, man, I want to ask more questions about that. Like, tell me more, you know? And, I don't know. I think that when we can find that peace, that community, and again, that united as one, this like group of people, we're human beings that regardless of what we believe or backgrounds or political views or whatever that is, even as divisive and polarized as it is, like if we can just find our commonalities and find those things, I think the world would be serve to be a better place.
Totally.
Jonathan, we're getting close to the end here. Something I like to ask people is, I like to ask what are 3 things, but what are some things, what is a thing, what is something you want people to know about you? That if somebody was to meet you for the first time, you'd want them to know about you.
Oh.
It's tough, I know.
Yeah.
It gives you that, like,
Yeah, that is an interesting thing. I think,
3 is an acceptable thing. You can think of 3 different things, you know? I think I like giving people options. When I go to restaurants, I always ask the waiter or waitress, I'm always like, what are your top 3 things on the menu? Because if you ask them what their favorite thing is, they're like, oh, I always have so many. So if you ask them 3, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, like, well, I really like this, and I like this, and this one's really good too.
I mean, I'm kind of, in some ways, like if I do meet someone, I'm kind of okay with not being known or people like not knowing anything about me.
Yeah.
But I think routinely I like being perceived as interesting. So to whatever degree that's true or not, I like when people, like friends will be like, this is Jonathan Grant, and this is he's the most interesting person I know, and I'm like, oh,
the mystery behind you.
Yeah, and I always appreciate those kinds of lead-in. Although, where do you go from there in a conversation? But yeah, I'm always fascinated, and I have a lot of friends who are interested in astrology and people's signs and stuff, and
sure,
and in that there's kind of your sign that people perceive you as, and the one that you function as, and so I think I'm always intrigued by that difference between like what people perceive about me versus who I am inside, and I think that's made me very curious about exploring when I meet people, finding out, who are they, who is the they that people don't know about them. And
yeah,
it's intriguing.
Yeah, my wife always talks about, she's like, I've got work Dana, and then I've got like real Dana. And like when she's at work, she's got this other hat she like puts on, and she's like this different person, but she's like more relaxed and doesn't think through the same critical lens and the same like thing when she's at home. And she was like, did you see I put work Dana on? Like I put work Dana hat on, and like, yes, I did notice that, honey. Like you were very different. But it's similar to what you were saying. Like you've got these, like when you go out in public, you put this thing on versus when you're sitting at home and behind a microphone and a phone. I don't know. Yeah, like you're different with the people that you're closest with your family, with your friends, than you are with the stranger, the person you meet, the person you are when you walk into the church, or when you're trying to, get a new installment of art in the museum, or whatever it is.
Hopefully all of those pieces are accurate to the whatever degree.
Yeah. Yeah, they could not be. Yes. My bad.
Yes. Oh yeah, it's been so good to chat with you.
Absolutely. Jonathan, thank you so much. Anything you want to leave us with? Any way you want to plug your website and your blog? And
oh yeah, so grantatchurch.com is my website.
Cool.
And also my Patreon and my YouTube.
Ooh.
So check those out.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, they're really cool. Everybody, if you're listening, please check them out. They're really cool. We've got some really cool videos and art and faith, and that's what they're titled correctly, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I really liked it. I checked out your website, this week actually. I've just checked it out since I kind of reached out to you, and it's really cool. I really like your videos. They're awesome. They're really well done.
Thanks. Oh.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Let's close things out there. What do you say?
Cool. Perfect.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate you listening. If you listen this far, again, check out Jonathan's website. We'll post that in our page as well. Don't forget, do good. Let's make a difference in this world. Find those ways to give back, to do good, to make a difference in the world around you. If you have the time, if you have the ability, check out crazyfaceuno.com. We've got some mugs for sale, and we've got ways for you to donate and to contribute to our cause and what we're trying to create here. If you have that ability, we really appreciate it. Otherwise, listen, share to our podcasts, and we'll talk to you next time. All right, everybody. We love you. Peace.